And now, here's your host, Alessandra Torresani.
David is here. He's in D.C.
I'm in the basement of a nondescript government building doing research with your tax dollars,
Ooh.
solving the world's problems.
Oh my God.
And I have a beautiful head cold that you can hear in my already very nasally voice.
Well, you know what? I like your voice though. I think it works. It works for the pod.
I have a face for radio.
Listen, when this strike is over, the directors, like you said, they're going to be calling you, and the writers, and they're going to be like, "Where is David Haggerty? We need him right now." Like that's what's going to happen.
That's quite honestly the last thing that's going to happen, but I can dream.
Well, I have 3 topics that I want to talk about. The first topic that I want to talk about is something that I found so fascinating. One of my guests who was on a couple weeks ago, his name is Kyle Ayers, and I went to his live one. It was live. It was a one-man show, and it was about him living with trigeminal neuralgia. Do you know about this?
There's an interesting dichotomy between people like myself that have doctorates in neuroscience, and clinically trained neurosurgeons.
Right.
And I think the world, the general public, the lay population, whomever, who's never like cracked open a medical textbook or looked at a cadaver, thinks we're like very similar. And like to me, the brain stops the second you cross the first spinal vertebrae, C1.
Interesting.
And like there's people that study peripheral pain and spinal cord injury and like all that stuff.
Sure.
Like not to say that there aren't neuroscience out there who like actually look at things below your chin. But like if you put a gun to my head and we're like, name all 12 cranial nerves,
couldn't do it.
I would fail that test.
Right. Well, it's just totally
Which maybe
different.
means I shouldn't have a doctorate.
Well, you know what? We're not gonna take that doctorate away from you because of this podcast. Well, no, the reason why I asked is because I went to go see the show, and I obviously had interviewed him, and I know him, and learning so much, and I just thought it was so fascinating because you know we talked about you on the podcast, and we say how you always used to tell me, you know, if someone says they know everything about the brain, like don't trust them because we know absolutely nothing about the brain in the grand scheme of things, and like that we don't know specifics, and there's so much more to explore. I feel like our brain is like the ocean. We've only tapped into just a small amount of it. And is that statement still correct? Or
I'm giving you the long-winded answer as I normally do here.
Yeah.
But I think that like this statement is deeply correct. And this statement also, the one that I'm trying to make, shows my bias around how I study and am trained and how people like me sort of do the active science.
Sure.
There are many neurological conditions that impact our mental health that reside physically outside of the brain. There are many nerves that come out of the back of your brain into your spinal cord that manifest themselves in sort of peripheral changes that like deeply influence our mental health. And it is a blind spot for everyone like me.
Wow.
Like I know what this man's condition was, how it's been treated, etc., from like a general Wikipedia level understanding.
Right.
Like I can give you the highlights and bullet points of, you know, like this is the nerve that gets messed up and this is why it does the thing, and you can go in and resect the tissue and like you'll see improvements. What it means beyond that, nobody has any absolutely no clue. And like, you know, I've said it before and I say it in many ways, but like not to scare people. We don't know.
Right.
And it is like, it is so wild to be like, it's still sort of the Wild West of like, you take a scalpel and you cut into somebody's neck and skull and like remove a little bit of brain tissue here and there. And then you're like, oh, they feel better.
Well, and what's so wild is that it didn't work. It worked for 6 months, right? And they put
And then
these
it regrows.
Yes. Well, they put these receptors, he was saying, I think he said receptors, where they like kept it so it wasn't like a loose wire. And he said in 6 months it came back. And I said to him, I go, is there any point where they thought, maybe you're just like making it up? Like, or you feel like there's still pain and it's like a phantom? And he goes, well, yeah. He's like, I'm in a support group where a guy has a phantom limb and like wants to scratch the bottom of his foot, even though it's not there. And like, to me, that like blew my mind because I had never heard of phantom limb before and I had never, and so hearing about that. So and that's just like another example of like how wild our brain is, that it can truly convince you that you have a foot there when it's not ever been there in years or something,
But this is like so this is the bananas. Like, we've now approached me teaching neuroscience on a podcast again, but like there's a part of your brain, it's a strip that runs
at the top
from,
of the
here,
brain. Okay.
On the very outside of your brain too. Like
Okay.
your brain's got a bunch of folds in it, gyri and succuli, for those of us who are Latin.
Cool. Sounds like a succulent plant.
And inside that strip, there's a sensory, a presensory, a premotor, and then like where that border happens in your brain.
Sure.
Between the sensory and motor parts of your sort of cortex and neurons. There's a strip of brain that's very sort of historically named the homunculus.
Okay.
And as you go from the outside of this strip up to the top, those neurons map to specific body parts.
Okay.
So like there's a part of that homunculus cortex that maps to your hands and your feet and your waist and your arms and your neck and then your head. So what happens is when someone cuts your arm off, there's part of your motor cortex that have neurons that fire in response to where that arm is in space, whether it's touching something, where it's getting sensory input, like all of that comes up your arm through your nerves, up through your spinal cord into that part of your brain, which then sends feed forward signals out.
Incredible.
You cut that arm off, you lose the neurons locally here, but that part of your brain is still active.
Right.
So like people that have phantom limb pain are humans, which means they're smart enough to look you in the face and look at their arm and be like, oh, it is not there anymore.
Right.
But those neurons in the top of your brain don't die. So the rest of the neurons in your brain are still pretty much convinced that you have an arm.
But see, that's what's so wild, right? I mean, we're talking about how the brain believes that something's there. And physically, if we're looking, we're like, it's not there.
But I'm trying to tell you, it's not a belief. It is ground truth. No, but like I think splitting the words is really important, because like what people who experience this kind of stuff are like the mental health component of this is derived not from the fact that you have a belief that your arm is still there. For all intents and purposes, according to your brain, that arm is there.
Right.
The mental health aspect of this comes in as you, as a living individual who like operates in a society and a culture, have to reconcile the fact that your brain is right, but your perception of your brain's reality is wrong. And to communicate that to other people is like bananas hard. Like we work with a lot of veterans who like lose limbs in combat, or there's the physical, I've lost a limb and I have pain where that limb no longer is, that I have to deal with as an individual, that is already hard enough. And then there's the like added social component on top of that, being like, it is now my duty to explain to everyone else this wild biological phenomenon that I feel, that causes me immense pain, hurt, suffering, confusion.
Yeah.
To people that have that limb, who can never feel this thing, who can never experience this thing,
can never understand it.
You will get people who are sympathetic and empathetic to that. And then you will get people who are like, I don't know how to compute that. And like that friction is the thing that drives the mental health aspect to it. And like, it's a hypothesis to, be like, there is nothing wrong with that man's brain. Molecularly speaking, how the neurons are assembled, they did a resection, it came back. Where the pain and suffering and mental health comes from is the amalgamation of all those things together. Like, this is not like your blood pressure is high. Let's give you a drug to lower your blood pressure.
Right.
Like, when you measure the thing with a tool, the measurement says, no, it's totally fine.
Right.
So like doctors then freak out because they're like, we are trained to be like, let's go in and take a blood test and see these markers. And if the markers are out of whack, then we know something's wrong and we can give you a drug to fix it. Like, if you look at someone's brain and all the signals that you know how to measure are completely normal, and the person is like, I feel this immense pain, or I feel this immense discomfort, and you're like, well, the test says this and you say this, we don't know what to do.
But I think that that's the whole point to me, which, and how I tried to relate to Kyle in a way of, I can't understand, other than living with chronic migraines, I can't comprehend what it's like to be living with this pain in your nerve and your head. And it just, I mean, it's called the suicide disease for a reason, right? So I can't understand that. Or I can't understand the phantom limb thing, But what I can understand is what it's like for someone to say, well, if we scan your brain, it looks beautiful and it looks great. But if we really were to get to the bottom of it, you do live with something called a mental illness and you do need to be on medication because of it. So it's kind of that thing where, just because that's what's so complicated, I guess what I'm trying to say is what's so complicated about the brain is that it's something you don't see. It's something you can't pinpoint and say you broke your arm, or you're right, we did your blood pressure and you need, to be put on blood pressure medication because it's too low. It's like with your brain, it's really trial and error when it comes to medication for antidepressants, for bipolar disorder, for schizophrenia, like all this stuff. It's because you can't see it. Someone can't see it walking down the street.
And I mean, there's sort of two camps of people in neuroscience right now too. There's the camp of people that are like, we all agree we can't see it, but there's people that think that we're missing it. There's people that think that we can build new tools, or we can come up with new brain scans, or we can find these new biomarkers, and then mental illness will be exactly like every other disease. There's too much sugar in your blood.
And where do you land in this conversation?
I look at the brain like a big control board.
Huh.
Like, you ever been on set and there's like the big board with all the sliders and knobs, and you see it in audio interfaces and video interfaces. To me, that is the brain. It's a series of wires that plug into that board. Information gets sent through that wires, and then somebody sits at a mixing console and changes the levels. And if you push the levels up over here, it gets louder. Or if you pull the levels down over here, the colors change. Your brain just does that. There just happens to be like a 10 to 100 different billion inputs at that control board. And there's like people who are like, oh, I can take a picture of that board and be like, this is what the board arrangement looks like when there's disease, and this is what the board arrangement looks like when there's health. So there's people that thinks it's a signal processing issue. We can find the signal, we can correct that signal. Correcting that signal will make everything sound and look pretty again.
Right. For
the analogy, I sit in the camp where it's not the levels, it's the actual signal that comes into the board that's broken. I believe there's something fundamentally wrong in there's like a kink in a cable somewhere. You know what I mean? Like, it's noise, it's static. It's like sitting in front of a television before cable disappeared. Right. And like you got static, you got noise. Right. And how do you fix the noise versus how do you tune the noise at the board, or two fundamentally
different things,
polar opposite mathematical ideas to try and solve. So I would say I sit in both camps.
Yeah.
But I think that like you have to know where you are on that spectrum.
Right.
And like there are many people and there are many organizations that do not know that this spectrum exists in the first place. Nonprofits, advocacy groups, yada, yada, yada. And they take their lived experience and they churn it up and they say, this is the problem and this is how I'm going to solve the problem and this is how I'm going to fundraise to do the thing. And inevitably they get placed somewhere on that spectrum of like, it is a signal to noise processing issue versus it is we need to tune the parameters better issue. But a lot of them don't know where they are on that spectrum. And a lot of them don't know how to differentiate each other between where they are. There are a million mental health organizations. There are a million people having these conversations. where they land to someone like me means a lot.
Yeah, of course.
And like, we've got to do a better job at educating everyone else around us to be like, this spectrum is important.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not important to be like, there will be winners and losers in this battle. But if you could start to distribute, so you don't have like clumps of organizations and people trying to solve the problem all at the exact same point on that spectrum, that distributed processing power gives you a lot more in advance.
Huh. Okay.
And I promise I will tie this back.
No, this is so fascinating.
No, but like I'm saying, like I will have like, my point is your friend who you had on the podcast, and you both said very nice things about me, which made me feel great. I feel like it's difficult to look at him and say, there is nothing wrong with you. Like, there is like a social and cultural and like makes you feel you have sympathy and empathy for people. And like, because of that, the way we approach solving his biologically relevant problem gets steered through this lens of like, there must be something wrong.
Right.
There must be some lever we can pull. There must be something that's going on. We must be able to go in there with a scalpel and cut it out. And my approach is, the problem actually doesn't reside here. The problem resides here. What are therapies that we can build using biofeedback or, EMDR or psychedelics?
Right.
That don't focus on the problem as a focalized, like, to me, there's nothing wrong with this man. But the problem is not in the balance here. We need to go in and cut stuff out or reconnect or plug things into the board differently. The problem is everywhere. And you need to take a distributed approach to actually treating it. But like, to get to that point, to make that turn and say, I want to look at this problem differently. I want to look at solving your mental health problem differently. Step one of that process is looking at him and saying, there's nothing wrong with you. And that's really difficult to do.
Yeah.
You need more diversity in the way that you approach those problems to try and solve them.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I deeply sympathize and empathize with them, but like, we went in, we cut out the thing, and 6 months later it's back. Like, to me, you've just proven my point is correct. Like, there's nothing wrong with you there.
Right.
I say that with empathy. I want him to listen to this and like disagree with me and like have a conversation about it. But I like, you have to, like, it's such a difficult problem to solve. This is not, there's too much sugar in your blood, pee it out.
Right.
Like,
and I think that's what's so complicated, right? And
bananas.
the way that everyone should go back and listen to the episode because it'll explain so much. But I think that the most insane thing to me is that he literally was in a relationship with this woman who was like Googling all of his symptoms when they were trying to figure it out, came up with the most extreme, suicide disease, right? Saw this, brought it into the doctor, and the doctor actually was like, yeah, your worst fear actually is coming true. Like, this is what it is. And like, to have that moment, right? We always say like, oh, never look at not Wikipedia. What is it? Never look at
WebMD.
Thank you. WebMD. Never look at Wikipedia. No, never look at WebMD.
I mean, that
because,
too.
Well, that too. But but never look at WebMD because it's always going to say that you're dying. You know what I mean? And then you go in there and it's like, oh, by the way, you are dying. So it's just so wild. And so I just was so curious kind of what your thoughts were. And on a side note, I'll put you guys in touch because I think you guys would have a great time chatting.
I mean, we know nothing though, but that's what I'm saying.
But
like,
that's my
to
point.
know nothing and take the same approach to trying to learn something that fails over and over again. And like, you sort of just got to take a step back and be like, I'm going to walk around the wall instead of trying to climb over it.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you for that. My second topic that I wanted to talk about.
Unrelated.
2 and 3 are
Slightly
kind of very related in a weird way. But it was, I had sent you this article that it was saying, it was a People magazine. I love sending you like ridiculous things. And it was this woman that was saying that she's been breastfeeding for 4 years to her son, who's 4 years old now, and that she's going to continue, or a girl, I can't remember, but she's going to continue on. And it brought up this whole thing for me because it's so funny. I am currently, Lady just turned 15 months, and I'm still breastfeeding her on occasion. She eats real food, but she'll have a hit here and a hit there, as I always say. And I'm totally more embarrassed now giving her breast milk out in public than I ever was, even at the very beginning. And I feel like there is such a shame where people have been saying to me like, oh, well, aren't you done? You're still breastfeeding. You're still doing this. And I'm like, well, when she's ready, she's ready. And it's interesting because I have some really good friends, really close friends actually, who I've become close with, you know, through my mom group and through all this stuff and through babies. And they're still breastfeeding as well. And you know, we laugh about it being like, oh my God, like I can't believe that they're still in the boob. But like we all have the same kind of, I wouldn't say like theory or the same like idea, like, but we all have the same thing where we're saying they'll stop when they're ready, you know? But is it normal to continue on after a year? I mean, what is normal? Should I feel shamed? Should I tell everyone F off? Like, what is kind of the science behind it all? I don't know. Not that I'm going to listen. I'm still going to breastfeed, but I'm just curious. Like, should I be shamed? And like, should I really feel this shame or should I be like, bye?
I think that from a biological standpoint,
Yeah.
again, like another controversial take as a scientist, I don't believe in evolution as a first principle of biology.
Oh,
You
interesting.
like listen to
Okay.
all these finance guys, like all these tech guys, and they're like first principles. And no one really knows what it means. But I think like in biology, a lot of people fall back onto evolution, which is a very real phenomenon for
Yeah.
those of you who are going to clip the thing and
Yeah.
be like, you look at many other similarly related species
Mm-hmm.
to us,
Right.
things that we evolved from, things that essentially have breasts that produce milk, but all the way down to like cows,
Okay.
udders,
Right.
like similar biology, and whether they co-evolved or evolved and then sort
Came
of
together,
separately
sure.
and came to
Sure.
just that there are all words for this that we don't need to do. If you look at those animals and you say, you know, like I have mice in lab upstairs right
Mhm.
now. The females, they get pregnant, they produce milk. The little baby mice go up to them, they drink the milk. If you like calculate a percentage of time that a offspring or a weanling or some whatever we call it in biology like interacts with a mother that's producing some sort of milk, goat, it gets hard
Mm.
because if I put a male and a female mouse in a cage, or you have two goats in a field,
Mhm.
what they do is they just constantly have sex
They
and
constantly
produce
are boning.
offspring. They're constantly boning. They're constantly having litters. Those litters are feeding. And how they decide that it's the stop time for the offspring to have milk, like when the cutoff date is, because they get pregnant again.
Mm.
And their biology changes, so their milk supply drops off.
Mm.
And that's the sort of impetus for those offspring to get weaned off of like the entire life cycle of most what you can think of as farm animals
Right.
or primates that produce milk, that have breasts, that feed their children from those. The entirety of their lifespan is focused on reproduction and offspring rearing. Like that is their
That's their
fundamental job.
Right.
It's their purpose. So like we as humans have evolved out of that because we don't have 14 litters anymore.
No. Well, some people do, but I
Some
don't
people
plan on
do.
that.
But for those people,
Yeah.
if you're a mother who has 10 children independently of each other, not like twins or
Right,
triplets,
right, right,
whatever, like you've gotten pregnant, you've delivered, like to do that in your lifespan, you've got to stop breastfeeding at some point and start producing another child at some point.
Mm-hmm.
So like people that look to evolution to be like, there are other animals out there that breastfeed for 2 years and then they stop doing it because their kids are old enough. And then therefore we as humans should follow the same pattern, or it's too long in comparison to them. Socially, we don't reproduce in the same way that the beings that you're trying to compare yourself to.
Right.
My official stance is A, stop telling women what to do. B, if your boobs produce milk, suck on them. Like, just like until that stops happening, who fucking fucking cares?
Yeah, I mean, that's what's so crazy is I'm producing so much milk that I'm like,
Bro,
I can't
who
stop.
cares? There is no biologically relevant reason why the breast milk that you produce after 4 years of breastfeeding your child
Right.
is any different or any less beneficial.
Then the first like 6 weeks. Yeah.
And for like all the weirdo bodybuilders that are like absolutely roided out of their minds that are like stealing breast milk from Facebook groups to
What?
use is
What?
oh
This is
boy,
a thing?
boy. Yeah, man, like grown ass men have now decided on the internet that drinking breast milk is the ultimate protein source for pre-workout and workout recovery. So there's a
Oh.
bunch of dudes that are like hacking moms that overproduce milk that are donating it to other moms.
So you're saying this is a business that I could be doing while on strike?
Yeah, you should be pumping your boobs into bags and selling those bags at the local Gold
But is there
Gym.
any truth to that?
Yeah, a little bit. Sure. Like
I mean,
biologically
I know that
speaking,
they say that
sure.
there's truth to like, there's so many amazing antibodies that are in breast milk.
Yeah. But you're as a grown ass man aren't going to be getting those
Are
things.
you going to be needing those
you've
antibodies?
passed that critical window of like I need X, Y, and Z nutrients and hormones.
Right.
Like sure you'll get some of them, but like are you a 2-year-old that's absorbing the same amount of nutrients?
Right. That's very true. Very true.
No.
But is there anything that you would say, like, so you're talking about how, let's use a goat as an example, right? Like they stop breastfeeding because they want to have another baby. What happens if you're breastfeeding and you get pregnant, like, and you're still making milk? Like, are there any repercussions there? Like, are there any anomalies that happen? Like,
for those of us who don't know, your milk supply is brought on by a flush of prolactin and oxytocin after you give birth. This is why they tell you, or this is why they pull a baby out of you. Mm-hmm. And the thing that stops the contractions from happening, the pushing your baby out if you deliver vaginally, and the things that they give you to induce pregnancy are those two hormones. So what happens is you get this flush of oxytocin. Mm-hmm. Like when you go in and you get Pitocin.
Well, they gave me Pitocin.
Just a mimetic of oxytocin.
But, they gave me Pitocin to stop my contractions. I mean, to have me start contracting so it would close up because everything was falling out of my body.
Correct. So like you need all of that drug in your body to sort of terminate pregnancy.
Yeah.
And then you get to a point where you stop producing that because you're no longer pregnant.
Right.
Flush of a new hormone that causes your milk supply to come up.
Wow.
When you get pregnant again, you're going to start producing oxytocin.
Wow.
So it's just going to counteract your milk supply.
Wow.
So you'll still produce. There are many pregnant mothers who are still breastfeeding.
Right.
Ask them how much their milk production has dropped.
Probably
and that's the golden question. And it's just like fundamentally hard to be quite literally, again, evolution is first principles, delivering a baby in a field or in a manger and like having another baby.
Yes. Well, do people,
so it's just like,
do people,
people do it.
Wow. Something that I had read, because a friend of mine had said that their friend in Florida that this happened to in Florida. So who knows? It could be a Florida thing, but is it true that women that are still breastfeeding and then get pregnant have a higher percentage of having twins?
There's someone's going to fact check me on this. There's a hormone that ramps up early in pregnancy, maybe GSK, something like that.
Uh-huh.
Where if you take that hormone and you throw it through the roof, the odds of your embryo splitting
are high.
Go up.
And we still don't know why an embryo splits, right?
Yeah, that's like a real scientific nightmare trying to answer.
Okay, we're not.
Like we know how. We know how it splits.
Right.
Why? I have no idea.
Yeah.
That's why people that do IVF, because those hormone levels are so high, they like pump you full of everything.
Right.
To like try and get an embryo to take.
Right. And that's why it splits.
And they'll implant multiples, so multiples will happen, and then some of those embryos will split. It's just like a hormone balance thing.
Wow.
So like that's the clock you're racing against.
Yeah.
There is a series of papers, I want to say from the late 90s, and it's still an ongoing research area where theoretically, if you give the correct cocktail at the right time of hormones in the correct order, you can get males to produce milk. Biologically
What?
born males.
Wow.
We have the same breast tissue, man.
Sure. Yeah, I guess you're right.
The reason I have nipples is because we both start out as the same sex in an embryo.
Yeah.
So the tissue's the same. The reason why I don't produce milk is because I don't have the right hormone.
Wow.
But like
that's
biologically
so
speaking,
fascinating.
there's no real reason why you couldn't if you drugged it correctly.
Wow.
So like again, like the in real life for other animals that are much different social dynamics are the reasons they stop breastfeeding is because they get pregnant again.
Yeah.
And if you're like a mouse, you're not like doing like, oh, like I have a job to balance and I can't pump at work and like that. You just like,
Well, not for nothing. The mice that work for the government and for the science, they have jobs. They have hard jobs.
but like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, no, I know.
So
Yeah.
to answer your question, the reason why people care, I presume, is it makes them uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Just like socially speaking.
Yeah.
And I'm like, who cares?
Yeah. Who
Like,
cares?
who cares? A lot of it is like weird sicko men.
But you know what's been so surprising is the people that keep commenting. I'll say for me, and this kind of ties into my third and final thing is how I love that you said like don't tell women what they should do, like stop telling people that, women what to do with their bodies, But what's so funny is it's women that have been saying to me, "Oh, you're not done yet." And it's this weird.
Well, you guys are like,
but it's either the generation of my mom, right, who are like, why are you still doing this, like blah blah blah, all this stuff, or it's this weird generation that's my generation, okay, and I know that you know this, where it's like everything is super like regimented, everything is on a schedule, everything is black and white, there's no gray, there's nothing in between, and you're just like, I truly feel like I am a hippie, and never in a million years would I consider myself to be a hippie. But I feel like that in the sense where I'm like, oh, like,
you're
lady wants a
such the
tit, let's have a
opposite of
tit.
hippie.
But that's what's
No, but I mean, like,
it's
look,
bizarre.
it's control.
Yeah,
Like,
but
it is such a chaotic world that we live in.
Yeah.
People don't know, and then they grasp onto the thing that they can control.
Right.
And then they find social environments in which people have views that are similar to theirs.
Yeah.
I think I explained this. I made a comment in a meeting earlier this week, something akin to if you ask a bunch of people at AA how they feel about alcohol, you'll get the same answer.
Yeah.
Like you stuff people that consume very diverse sources of information into the same room, into the same friend groups, into the same chambers. They all converse amongst themselves. They find a ground truth that appears to be real to them. For some people, that is, you should stop breastfeeding at 6 months. Some people, that is, you should stop breastfeeding at 1 year. And for some people, that is, you should breastfeed until they're 5, until they stop, until you get tired of it.
Yeah.
Till your nipples crack and bleed until you can't fucking do it anymore.
Yeah.
But like the real interesting thing to me is like, why do those groups infight? Like they want the same thing.
Yeah.
Like at the end of the day, you're all justifying your decisions wherever you fall in one of those groups as being like, I'm doing the thing that I believe is the healthiest for my. The fact that people are like, no, you're doing it wrong. Like we should just do a mom group episode where like we read Facebook mom group posts and just be like, these people are absolutely evil to each other.
Incredible. I am so down for that.
And I'm just like, I don't get it. I understand why you are so tired and anxious and resource strapped and like all of the things. But why it manifests as I am better than you, or the decisions I'm making are better than the decisions you're making, are sort of, I don't want to say confusing to me. But they're like, guys, we're all trying to organize around the same thing.
Yeah.
Like, I don't get it. And like, there's so many unknowns.
But I think that's the world that we live
Well,
in.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, there's so many unknowns. There's some person in the current reality that we live in that says the reason that you know your child will be a roaring success or failure at age 35 was because you breastfed them for 15 months. And only if you would have done 7 months, they would have been the next president of the United States. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's just such a benign absurdity associated with, like, even if someone goes out and runs a clinical trial and they're like, 12 months and 4.5 days is the correct time to stop breastfeeding. Like, I don't know, people that do it plus or minus 6 months, like, the outcomes associated with those decisions are minuscule at best.
Yeah.
Like, why is the question, we must find the exact date that's maximally optimal, and not, like, I don't know, why don't we just, like,
let it
give
be
pregnant women more resources and give new moms opportunities to make decisions that they should feel empowered to do,
and that they should do what they want. And but I
like,
have to
a
say,
lot of the reason why people stop breastfeeding so soon is because they have to go back to work.
well,
So, like,
and
if we
that's fair.
solved maternal, no, but, like, what I'm saying is, like, if we solved maternal care,
of course,
or we, like, provided people with better resources to pump at work, like, don't you think naturally people would be like, oh, it's more socially acceptable to breastfeed longer?
Yeah.
Like, it's just a function of society. And, like, these people can't see the forest when they're in the trees.
It's also doctors too, like, I know certain like my pediatrician and some other pediatricians, like, they have conflicting opinions, you know what I mean, as to, like, when you should stop using a pacifier, when you should stop using the bottle,
It's just a belief system, man.
So then
it's all a belief system.
Exactly. It's all a belief system. And we are here to tell you,
if it actually killed you, we would have figured it out by now.
100%.
It would have been so blatantly obvious that it actually mattered that we would have been like, oh, yeah, smoking causes lung cancer, kind of nonsense.
Yeah. Well, all I'm going to say is do what you got to do. Don't tell moms what to do. David, this has been such a fantastic episode. We're going to have so many more fun facts and fun, exciting things coming your way. David, we love you so much. You're the best. And we will have some more Beauty in the Brain soon.